We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Gimel Amid Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 63b. This daf is sponsored by Sean Kashani. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amid or a daf, please see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amid, the Gemara was discussing the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if a person says that Haread Mekudeshes li or Mekudeshes to me on the condition that my father agrees, so then the Mishnah said if the father agrees Mekudeshes, and if the father does not agree, it's not Mekudeshes. And the Gemara initially said, what does it mean that my father should agree? It means to say that my father has to actually say out loud that he agrees. But the Gemara questions that from the middle case of the Mishnah, because in the middle case of the Mishnah, it says that if the father dies, it's a good Kiddushin. Now, if the father dies, why should it be a good Kiddushin? He didn't actively say, he didn't say out loud that he agrees. Rather, what do you have to say the middle case of the Mishnah means? It means al menas sheyishto gab. It means on the condition that my father is silent, that he doesn't protest. And the fact that he doesn't protest, that's enough to make it a good Kiddushin. And Rashi explains, al menas sheyishto kishayishma. When he hears about it, if he's quiet, it's a good Kiddushin. Rotza ha'av, if the father agrees to it, means sheshosak b'shashmiya, he's quiet when he heard about it. Mekudeshes, then it's a good Kiddushin. And lo rotza shemicha, what does it mean lo rotza? It means that he protests. That's how you have to understand the middle case of the Mishnah. But then the Gemara continues further and says, Ema Seifa, let's look at the end of the Mishnah. The end of the Mishnah says, Meis haben, let's say the son dies, Melamden es ha'av lomar she'eno rotza, then we teach the father to say that he does not agree. The idea of the end of the Mishnah is to say that we tell the father to say he doesn't agree so that it's not a good Kiddushin, so that there's no issue of Yibum. But the Gemara says, Amai, but why is that true? Vashasak, again, he was quiet, so it should have been a good Kiddushin. What's it going to help to teach him that he does not agree? And Rashi explains, Vashasak le v'chalu Kiddushin. Again, the father was quiet at the time that he heard about the Kiddushin, and therefore the Kiddushin was chal, and it's not going to help if you tell the father to say that he doesn't agree. And so the Gemara continues, Ella, rather, what do you have to say in the safe of the Mishnah? You have to say, Amar la menas shelo yimcha abba, that what he said to her was on the condition that father doesn't protest, and so therefore in this situation, if you tell the father to protest, so then it's going to be effective and there's not going to be a Kiddushin. But if you're going to say that, Reisha b'chad taima, Mitziyasa v'seifa b'chad taima, are you going to say the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about one scenario and the middle of the end a different scenario? That is difficult. And Rashi explains, El al menas shelo yimcha, but you have to say the end of the Mishnah is talking where he says to her on the condition that my father doesn't protest, hach seifa de katani malamdin, meaning the end of the Mishnah that says that we teach the father to protest, lo misukma kireisha kal menas sheyishtuk. You can't say that it's going like the earlier part of the Mishnah, that it's on condition that he's quiet, because again, then if he was quiet, it's a good Kiddushin. Ela ba'al menas shelo yimcha, it has to be, it's a condition that he doesn't protest. V'chol kama demachi, and as long as he protests, akar lehusa, then he uproots the Kiddushin. Sharei lo kavaz man lemacha, because there is no specific set amount of time, he has any amount of time to protest. Now Rashi points out, you can't say the earlier part of the Mishnah is talking about this, where he says that if my father protests, is going to uproot the Kiddushin. Because if so, what does it mean that the father agrees? But he's able to protest forever. So there's never going to be Kiddushin. So you have to say what it means is as follows. On the condition that my father is quiet, and if he's quiet, it's a good Kiddushin. Lo shasak, and if he's not quiet, alter eina mekudeshes. If he's not quiet, he protests right away, so then it's not a good Kiddushin. Now, if he says on the condition that father shouldn't protest, so if the father dies before he protests, so then it's a good Kiddushin. But all the time that he's alive, it won't be a good Kiddushin because he could protest. And then again it said, and if the son dies, again then we teach the father that he should protest. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yanai says, yes, there is a difference between the beginning of the Mishnah and the middle and the end of the Mishnah, meaning to say again, in the beginning of the Mishnah where it said if the father agrees, then it's a good Kiddushin, that's talking about the situation is he had to be silent the moment he heard about it, and agreeing means that he's silent the moment he heard about it, and then it's a good Kiddushin, and again, if he protests the moment that he heard about it, it's not a good Kiddushin, that's the Reish of the Mishnah. The middle case and the end case of the Mishnah, meaning a situation, let's say, where the father dies, we said if the father dies, it's a good Kiddushin, and the end of the Mishnah where if the son dies, we instruct the father to protest, both of those cases are talking about as long as father doesn't protest. So in such a situation, as long as the father is alive, it's not a Kiddushin because he could protest. Once the father dies, he can no longer protest. It's a good Kiddushin. And again, if the son dies, we instruct the father that he should protest. That's Rabbi Yanai's understanding of the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reish Lakish says, Shema Mino, we see from this, from Rabbi Yanai's answer that the beginning of the Mishnah and the middle and the end of the Mishnah are talking about different scenarios. According to Rabbi Yanai, we would rather force and say that the Mishnah is talking about two different scenarios. And it all follows one Tana. And we'd rather not say that it's two different Tanoim. You could have said that the beginning of the Mishnah is one Tana, and the middle and the end of the Mishnah is a different Tana, and it's all talking about the same scenario, but he'd rather not say it's two Tanoim. It's better to say that the Mishnah changes scenarios and say it's all one Tana. And the Gemara continues, Rav Yosef Barami Yomer, Rav Yosef Barami says, Liolam Chad Taimu. Really, the Mishnah is talking all about the exact same reason, the same scenario. Umayal Menas Sheyir Tza'ab, and how can we explain again, in the beginning of the Mishnah, it says, on the condition that my father agrees, what it means is, Al Menas Shelo Yimcha Abba, Mikan Viat Shloshim Yom. It means on the condition that father doesn't protest for the next 30 days. There's actually a time limit to the amount of time that he can protest, and if you understand the Mishnah like that, you can explain the entire Mishnah, because in the beginning of the Mishnah, the idea is if the father agrees, what does that mean? It means he doesn't protest within the 30 days. If he doesn't protest within the 30 days, it's a good Kiddushin. And then in the middle case of the Mishnah, when it talks about the father dying, so in that situation, it's also a good Kiddushin, because once he dies, he's not going to be able to protest. And finally, the end of the Mishnah, it's talking about where the son dies, we tell the father he should protest. That's talking about within the 30 days. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Kidashti esbiti. Let's say a person says, I was Makadesh, my daughter, I gave her away to Kiddushin, ve'eni yodeya lami kidashtiya, but I don't know to whom I gave her away. And then somebody comes along and says, I'm the one that was Makadesh, your daughter, I'm married to your daughter. Neman, that individual is believed. Let's say one person says, I was the one that was Makadesh her, another person says, I was the one that was Makadesh her. So in such a situation, they're arguing who is the husband. Shneihem nosnim get, they both give a get. Rashi says they both give a get if she wants to marry someone else. V'imratzu, and if they want, echad nosen get, v'echad kones, one can give a get, and one can marry her. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav says, Nemon litain get. When we say that a person is believed to say, I was the one that was Makadesh, it doesn't mean he's believed to actually marry, it just means he's believed to give a get. Ve'ein nemon lichnos, but he would not be believed to marry her. And Rashi says, Amar Rav says, Hadetanan bo echad v'yomar ani kidashtiya nemon litain get kamar. When we say he's believed, we mean to say he's believed to give a get, and now she can go marry others. We believe him in that sense, that we believe that the proper person has divorced her. The nemon v'samchino leshu kidsha v'gito get. We believe that he was the one that was Makadesh her, and his get is a good get. We don't believe at this point that she's married to someone else, but we don't actually let him marry her. And the idea is nemon litain get. The reason why he's believed to give a get, ein adam chote v'lo lo. A person's not going to sin if there's no benefit to him whatsoever. If he's giving a get, there's no benefit for him to give the get to her, and so therefore we trust him. We say it must be that he was the one that was Makadesh her. However, ve'ein nemon lichnos, he's not believed to marry her because ema yitzro tokfo, because then we could always say it was just as Yetzer Hara, he's attracted to her, and he's really lying, he really did not marry her. And Rashi explains, she'ein adam chote b'davar she'eino nehna mimeno. If he gets no benefit, why would he sin? Lahater eishes ish chinam, just for no reason, he's going to allow this eishes ish. So again, that's why Rav says he's believed to give her a get, but he's not believed to marry her. Rav Asi says, af nemon lichnos, he's even believed to marry her. And Rashi explains, af nemon lichnos de lo chotziv l'meimer lefnei ha'av. He's not going to have so much chutzpah to say in front of the father, shakibel ha-kiddushin anihu, that I was the one that was makabel the kiddushin de mirtas, because he's afraid. Dilma machishle. Maybe the father really knows it wasn't him. He'll contradict him. V'yamar yadam de lavat, you have to lead kiddushin. I know that it wasn't you that gave me the kiddushin. And so therefore, for that reason, Rav Asi says he's even believed to marry her. And the Gemara continues, Umodi Ravasi ba'omeres niskadashti. Now Ravasi admits, let's say she says, that she herself says, meaning it's not the father, she says, I accepted a Kiddushin, ve'ini yodas lami niskadashti, and I don't know to whom I was betrothed. Uva echad v'yamar kidashti, and then someone comes along and says, I was the one mekadesh, she'ein nemon lichnos. In that case, he is certainly not believed to marry her, meaning to say, Ravasi will say that he's believed, because the guy won't have chutzpah against the father. We believe him, and we say he was the one that married her. But to say it to her, let's say she's the one that says she married him, and she doesn't know who, for him to have that kind of chutzpah, that he might be lying, and therefore Ravasi agrees that in that case, he's not believed to marry her. And the Gemara says, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Ratzu echad nosein get v'echad kones, that if they want, one can give a get, and one is able to marry her. It says explicitly in the Mishnah that one of them is in fact able to marry her. And so the Gemara says to Yufta the Rav, let us say that's a refutation of Rav. Rav said that a person is believed to say he was the one in terms of giving a get, but he's not believed to marry her. And the Gemara says, Amar Lach Rav will say to you, Shani Hasam, it's different over there. The Kevon the Ika Acher Bahadeh, because there's another person also coming. He's saying he's the one. So Yertuse Mirta, so there he actually would be afraid to lie, and therefore we can believe him in such a situation. And Rashi explains, Kevon the Ika Acher Bahadeh, Sha'omer Ani Kedashti, there's another guy saying I was on Makadisher, Mirtas Meikara, so now already he's afraid, Shema Yakir Ha'av Shechaveru Kitsha. Maybe the father will recognize that it was actually the other guy. V'lohu and not him. V'haikushta Amar v'shechenegdo shekichesh yari l'chonsa v'nosen get. So therefore he's really saying the truth. The other guy is the one, he's the one that's lying, he's afraid to actually marry her, he'll give the get. So that's why in this scenario, Rav would say that the individual is even believed to marry her. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavase de Ravasi, we have a brisa that supports Ravasi's opinion that the person is believed even to marry her. Kidashti asbiti ve'eni odeh lami kidashti. Again, a father says, I gave my daughter away to Kiddushin, I don't know to whom. Uvo echad v'yamar kidashti, and one person comes and says, it was me. Af nemun lichnos, he's even believed to marry her. Kinsa, now let's say he does marry her. Uvo acher v'yamar ani kidashti. Now a second person comes and says, I was the one that was really mekadisher. Lo kol heimenu la osra olav. So he doesn't have that ability to prohibit her to that other individual. Once she's already married to the first individual, that marriage remains. Ha'isha sha'amar niskadashti. Now let's say it's the woman who says that she accepted a Kiddushin. Ve'eni yodas lami niskadashti. She said, I don't know to whom I'm betrothed. Uvo echad v'yamar ani kidashti. And then someone says, I was the one that betrothed her. In that case, ein nemon lichnos. In that case, he's not believed to marry her. B'vnei shi mechap olav. Because there he relies on the fact that she will cover up for him. She'll go along with the lie. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, Mahu liskol al yada, would you give skila based on the father? If the father says, I gave away my daughter to Kiddushin, but he says, I don't know to whom the Kiddushin was, would that be enough to say she's mekudeshes, that there would be skila in a situation of adultery? Rav Amar ein soklin, Rav says there's no skila in that case. Ravasi Amar soklin, and Rav says there would be skila. And Rashi explains, Ma'u liskol al yado shel ha'av, meaning again through the father, kalamar al piv, through what he said. Imamar kidashti esbiti, let's say he says, I gave my daughter away to Kiddushin, ve'edei Kiddushin ein boin lefoneinu. When you have a situation, there are no edim that say there was Kiddushin, vezinsa, and then she commits adultery. Ma'u lahachzik al piv kidin nara ha'morasa l'sokla. What would be the halacha in terms of, let's say you have a nara ha'morasa, a young girl who's betrothed, there's generally skila. Would there be skila in this situation? Again, it's a machlokas between Rav and Ravasi. Rav says there's no skila, and Ravasi says there is skila. And the Gemara says, Rav Amarein Soklin, Rav says there's no skila. Ki hemne rachmona la'avli surah. The Torah only believes the father in terms of creating a prohibition. Now she's not allowed to marry others. But l'ktala lo hemne, they don't believe him so far as to say that there's going to be a death penalty. Ravasi says, Soklin, she would get skila. L'kula milsa hemne rachmona la'av. The Torah believes in terms of everything, the Torah believes the father. And Rashi explains, Ki hemne rachmana la'aves biti nasati li shazeh. It's actually a pasuk. The pasuk says, the father says, I gave my daughter away to this particular man. We're trusting the father that she was given away to Kiddushin. Li'isura la'osra kol ha'olam. So according to the first opinion, according to Rav, so we're only believing the father that she's not prohibited to others. But we're not going to believe in terms of a situation of even giving skila. And Ravasi says, no, we trust the father even to give skila. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravasi, and Ravasi says, Modina, Bo'omeres niskadashti she'ein soklim. But I admit, in a situation where she says niskadashti, let's say she's the one that says I was given away to Kiddushin, there's no skila. According to Ravasi, we believe the father, but we don't believe her in order to give skila. And Rashi says, Bo'omeres niskadashti v'zin. So let's say she says that she accepted a Kiddushin and she commits adultery, acharke, and after this, she'ein soklin osalpi. In that case, we're not going to give skila. Even though she said herself that she's an arusa, but still there's no skila. And the Gemara will explain what the reason is. And we will take a look at Tosas over here. Again, according to Rav, in terms of believing the father that she's an arusa, we don't believe him in terms of giving skila according to Rav. Now Tosas asks, but that very parsha is talking about skila, and it's talking about the father. In that very parsha, where it says, I gave my daughter away to this man for Erison, it says in that parsha that there's skila over there. So it says clearly against Rav that when the father is the one that says that she's an arusa, he is believed to give skila. You see clearly from the Torah that the Torah believes the father in terms of skila. And Tosa's answer, you could say that in that parsha there were also Edom, and that's why there was skila. But in terms of the prohibition, that we didn't need the Edom, we prohibit her even just based on the words of the father, as it says in the pasuk, as biti nasati lo ish. And the Gemara continues, V'yomer Ravasi, and Ravasi says, Hani shmaitza didi merafsa nigri. These halachas of mine, they break the roofs, meaning to say they're difficult to understand. Because hashta now, umabe mokum shimbol lichnos kones. In a situation, let's say, where the father says that I gave my daughter away to Kiddushin, I don't know exactly to whom, and then someone steps forward and we say that that person is believed and he's even allowed to marry her, and Amrit Soklim, and we say in that situation that we do give her skila based on the words of the father. Meaning to say in this situation where the father says she was mikudeshes, it could be to anyone in that situation, but we're somewhat lenient. And we say if someone steps forward, we believe it's him, we don't believe it's anyone else, we allow her to marry him, and still we say we believe the father and give skila. So makom shimbal lichnos ein kones. So in a situation, let's say, where the daughter is the one that says that she married someone she doesn't remember who, and then someone steps forward, we say that she's not allowed to marry that person who steps forward because we're concerned maybe she's actually married to someone else. We're stricter in that case. So if we're so strict, Eino Din Shasoklin, wouldn't it be true in that case by the daughter that certainly we should give skila? But says Ravasi Velohi, but it's not true. That's not a good question, because the fact is La'av Hemne Rachmana Ledidalo Hemna. The Torah believes him when he says that she's Mekudeshes. The Torah doesn't believe her, and therefore there's only skila when the father says it, not when she says it. And the Gemara continues, Rav Chisda and Rav Chisda says, Echad zeh v'echad zeh ein soklin. In both situations, there is no skila, meaning to say, again, it doesn't matter whether she's the one that says she was Mekudeshes, or if the father says she was Mekudeshes, there would not be skila, even though we would trust in terms of a prohibition, but there would not be skila in these cases. V'yaz Rav Chisda l'taim, and Rav Chisda follows his reasoning. The Amar Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda says, B'ni zeh ben teisha shanim v'yom echad. Let's say a person says, my son, this son is 9 years old in one day, or biti zu bas gimel shana v'yom echad, or my daughter, she's 3 years old in a day, namon l'karban avalo l'makos v'lo l'onshin. So he's trusted to say that in terms of an obligation to bring a karban, but not in terms of malchus, and not in terms of punishments. And Rashi explains, L'taimei, Rav Chisda follows his reasoning, Diomar einu av nemun lahachzik es habein li'onish al piv, lohu v'lo acher, meaning he says that the father is not believed to say that the son should get punishment, not the son himself, or not someone else through the son. And the case is as follows, Ben tes shanim, let's say the father says that the son is 9 years old in a day, biyaso biyo l'chayev achas min ha'arayus, misa v'karban. So at that point in time, he's old enough that his act of relations is considered to be an act of relations, and let's say you would have a situation of arayus over here, so there could be a chi of misa, there could be a chi of a carbon. V'chein ketana bas gimel biyasa biyah l'chayev gadol habaleh. Similarly, let's say you have a girl who's 3 years old. Her act of relations is an act of relations. If an adult has relations with her, v'hi ervolav, and she's a case of arayas with him, l'misa v'carbon, that could obligate misa or carbon. Im yesh edem shi bas gimel v'chein hakatan v'hu ben tes shanim avol al pi ha'av neman hu l'carbon l'shogeg. So again, if you had edem that the person was 3 or 9 years old, then there would be an obligation of carbon. Karban of Misa, but when it's just the father saying what age they are, so for Karban, for a situation of Shogeg, he's believed. Avalola Makos, but not if there's a punishment like Makos, V'leonish Misa, or a punishment of Misa, in Ba'ale Amazed, if the situation was an act of relations that was on purpose. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavasi de Rav Chisda, we have a brisa that supports Rav Chisda, B'ni Zeh ben Yud Gimel Shana v'Yom Echad. Let's say he says, my son is 13 years old in a day, or Biti Zu Bas Yud Beis Shana v'Yom Echad. He says, my daughter is 12 years old in a day. And Rashi explains, Ben Yud Gimel Uvas Yud Beis Nidrehen Neder V'Hekdesh and Hekdesh. At this age, so the Nedarim they make are good Nedarim, what they make Hekdesh is Hekdesh. Ulinyin Onshin shall call mitzvah Semevi Ushtei Saras. Simanhu, let's say in terms of punishments, if they have the 2 hairs, the signs of maturity, Vareim Gedolim L'chol Davar, they're considered adults totally. Aval Kodem L'chem, but earlier than this, Ein Nidra Neder Vein Hekdesh and Hekdesh. Their Nedarim are not Nedarim, what they make Hekdesh is not Hekdesh. V'Mevi Ushtei Saras Choshen Shema Shuma B'Yalmein, if they have the 2 hairs, we say maybe it's just Shuma, maybe it's not really a sign of maturity. They won't be punished for any Aveira, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Dalid Amud Aleph.